Right, so Israel and its destruction of hospitals under the excuse that they, like every other building in Gaza, is some sort of Hamas base and therefore is a legitimate target, has once again been making the news, and once again from Israel's perspective for all of the wrong reasons, because for as many times as they have been caught out fabricating evidence to justify their attacks, yet again these have been exposed for being yet another set of poorly put together packs of lies. With all the damage caused to lives and with all the injuries and fatalities we've been seeing graphically displayed across social media as a consequence of Israel's genocide, the places where such people can get treatment, hospitals, protected under international law within war zones as these are, instead are being targeted deliberately by the IDF, has caused particular anger. As if innocent people are not suffering enough there, Israel has to make it even worse. Denial of treatment, medicine, aid, the destruction of hospitals, and all based on trumped-up excuses time after time. Yet here we are, 19 months down the line from October 7th, and they're still doing it, and still lying about their justifications for doing so, and still thinking they can get away with it. But such is their incompetence in covering up for their actions that they are easily torn to shreds. And so the very least we can do is highlight their lies again and again for as many times as is needed, and shame those governments and our governments for still shamelessly providing cover for an entity so blatantly breaking international norms and conventions, especially as these attacks coincide with the anniversary of the Nakba, an event that did not take place in 1948. It simply started then, and is still continuing today. Right, so amongst the most harrowing aspects of Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza are repeated Israeli airstrikes on hospitals, facilities that are protected under international law, supposedly. They're meant to be. These attacks have not only resulted in massive civilian casualties, but have also been justified through a series of frankly questionable and all too often falsified claims by the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, in order to target those places. The real aim to deny medical aid to those facing the genocidal apartheid regime. From doctored photographic evidence to poorly constructed and evidenceless lies about Hamas activities in medical centres, Israel has once again deployed this familiar strategy to deliberately strike hospitals, manufacture a justification, execute a strike, and shift blame onto the victims. It is one of the most disturbing and too often repeated aspects of Israel's continued assault on Gaza, in the targeting of hospitals and the recurrent use of false intelligence and fabricated narratives to justify those attacks. In this latest series of airstrikes that have happened over the last day, Israel targeted the European hospital and the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis, claiming that Hamas leader Mohammed Sinwar was hiding in a tunnel underneath the European hospital. Here we go again, tunnels under hospitals. Like most Israeli lies about such things, though, it didn't take long for it to be torn apart, and this was done so via investigations published by one of Israel's own news outlets, no less, Haaretz. The alleged tunnel actually being located beneath a nearby school, the Jenin Secondary School for Boys, not the hospital itself. And when confronted with this contradiction, the IDF merely asserted that the tunnel extended under the hospital from the school. But of course they failed to provide any conclusive evidence, as per usual. But then, when is Israel ever expected to provide any? Believe us, or you're an anti-Semite and all of that palaver. The IDF's use of speculative and unverified claims to justify attacks on hospitals is nothing new, of course. It has come to define much of Israel's attacks on Gaza. Israel is condemned many times now by human rights groups and alternative media for recycling these baseless allegations of Hamas using hospitals for military purposes. Examples as this channel has certainly covered previously have suggested that weapon caches were discovered hidden behind MRI machines in hospitals. Lots of metal munition stashed behind devices with such stupidly strong magnets they can literally bend a hospital bed in half. But sure, there are guns behind it, aren't there? To Mr. Pointy, the former IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari misidentifying calendars and staff rosters on purpose, saying they were Hamas operative lists. The Israeli narrative has bordered on the absurd more and more occasions. In one notorious instance, of course, laptops allegedly belonging to Hamas operatives were found to have Hebrew keyboards, not Arabic ones, just all adding fuel to the fire that the IDF plant more evidence than they actually find, especially when it comes to hospitals. The Israeli campaign in Gaza City has been another focal point of misinformation as well in the last 24 hours. As justification for a brutal wave of airstrikes, the IDF circulated 7 photos purportedly showing wanted Hamas members in the area. However, one of these individuals was confirmed to have been killed back in March, several weeks ago now, so wriggle out of that one. The blatant fabrications just keep on exposing the depraved pattern of Israel being more than willing to falsify evidence to justify attacks on structures protected under international law and the rules of engagement, designed purposely to result in civilian casualties. Such actions amount to a clear manipulation of public perception and a violation of the laws of armed conflict. International humanitarian laws protect hospitals for a reason. There are mandates that strict adherence to the principles of distinction and proportionality in such things. When the IDF uses falsified or unverified intelligence to strike hospitals, it not only undermines the credibility of its own operations, but also contributes to the normalization of these war crimes, as do other nations continuing to allow it to happen with impunity by either turning a blind eye or, worse, supporting it. Time and again, the IDF has claimed that hospitals in Gaza serve as command centers for Hamas. These claims are always accompanied by dramatic, yet often unsubstantiated alleged evidence such as hidden tunnels, storage rooms, anything that can be painted as maybe looking a little bit suspicious, a little bit off. And it takes the efforts then of external groups and journalists who actually do proper journalism to get the truth out there. No wonder Israel has targeted so many journalists, is there? But Israel's lies have a habit of getting around the world anyway, before the truth has got its boots on. The Euromed Human Rights Monitor, amongst others, has highlighted the repetition of these falsehoods. The organisation has noted that Israel has made similar claims in past assaults on Gaza, often without producing any tangible proof. So the result is a consistent pattern of using propaganda to legitimise strikes on protected civilian infrastructure. Here's an excerpt of what they've had to say from the Quds News Network. Euromed Human Rights Monitor has condemned Israel's repeated claims of military use of hospitals in Gaza as a pretext to justify systematic killings and destruction. The group described these claims as pre-written narratives Israel uses to legitimise its war crimes. Israeli warplanes launched intense airstrikes on Tuesday night, targeting the courtyard and surroundings of the European Gaza hospital in Khan Yunis. Euromed confirmed that dozens of high-impact missiles struck the area, killing more than 35 Palestinians, including entire families in their homes and on the streets. Eyewitnesses and videos from the scene revealed horrific images. Fire engulfed the hospital's yard as civilians fled in terror. Flames and debris filled the air, triggering widespread panic and outrage across Gaza. Euromed said Israel's deliberate targeting of the European Gaza hospital came shortly after it bombed Nasser hospital. The Monitor called these attacks part of a strategy of slow death, aimed at pushing Gaza toward total collapse. The group stressed that removing Gaza hospitals from service amounts to the dismantling of life itself. These medical centres have become the last safe havens for Gaza's residents under siege and non-stop bombardment. Israeli forces reportedly prevented rescue teams from reaching victims. Euromed stated that the military targets civil defence crews trying to retrieve bodies from roads and rubble. The human toll of these false justifications is just staggering. The strikes on the European hospital resulted in the deaths of at least 16 individuals and injuries to over 70. Even Sky News' own analysis has also questioned the legitimacy of the IDF's evidence used to justify these airstrikes on these, noting many of the same contradictions as Haaretz have and the lack of corroboration. Furthermore, these attacks have not occurred in combat zones either. Both the European hospital and the Nasser hospital are situated outside currently designated areas of military engagement, further stripping Israel's justifications of any legal grounding, not that they frankly have any of that anyway. And the timing of these assaults can't be ignored either, of course, coinciding with the 77th anniversary of the Nakba, a day that marks the mass displacement of Palestinians in 1948. So to many, the message is clear. Historical trauma is being compounded by present-day atrocities, and that in that 77 years, nothing has changed. So the Nakba, in truth, just continues. The broader consequence of these actions is a growing erosion of trust. If Israel can be shown to fabricate justifications for such grave violations of international law, then its claims about all other aspects of the conflict must also be scrutinised with rigorous scepticism. Israeli narratives simply can never be trusted. It is imperative that we continue to scrutinise everything Israel say, all of the narratives they present to us, especially when they consistently use them as a prelude to violence against innocent people or civilian infrastructure. Israel's repeated use of false justifications for hospital strikes in Gaza should not be viewed as isolated incidents, but as part of their broader ongoing strategy of obfuscation and impunity. Believe us or else. Why won't you take our word for this and all the other nonsense and fake victimhood that they peddle? Media outlets, policy makers, civil society all have a responsibility to hold Israel accountable for their actions. Yet too many consistently fail to do that. Their official narratives should never be taken at face value, given the number of falsehoods they put out, particularly when they result in the loss of so many innocent lives. The international community has got to start demanding more transparency, the adherence to international law, and an end to the impunity with which these attacks are carried out. Israel might want to be made an exception of all of the time, might want to be placed on a pedestal above all else, but they must instead be held to exactly the same standards as everybody else. The recent airstrikes on Gaza's European and Nasser hospitals, accompanied by a now familiar litany of lies, are all emblematic of that larger, deeply troubling trend in Israel's conduct in Gaza. Through the attempted manipulation of evidence, to the recycling of debunked claims, to the calls to believe their version of events regarding deeply implausible situations, let's call them, especially with regards to their claims of what constitutes an alleged Hamas control center, the Israeli state continues to rationalize the deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure and civilians themselves, which nobody in their right mind should ever do. What Israel is getting away with threatens all of us. By escaping condemnation time after time for their actions, they erode the very principles of international humanitarian law we all subscribe to, and they normalise the mass killing of civilians under the guise of self-defence, when it is abject cowardice and genocide, and should be called out as such. In the face of such blatant deception, silence is still complicity. The global community have got to keep speaking out. We must all speak out about this. Keep paying attention to it, never forgetting what is going on there. Especially where our governments and representatives keep refusing to, demanding accountability and standing in solidarity with the victims of these indefensible acts. So the truth must be known, and once known, it must be acted upon. Even Israel's own hostages held in Gaza by Hamas are not safe from being politically weaponized, as Netanyahu's attempt to block the release of Israeli Soldrin and Alexander has gone on to show, keeping them in Gaza being the justification he needs to continue his genocide against innocents in Gaza, it seems, and hopefully get the US to attack as well, given that Alexander was a US citizen. For someone that maniacal leading Israel, it is no wonder there is no negotiating with them. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I will hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.